Hello loves, icing a square cake is super hard. Ask any baker, they'll tell you the same thing. First, the cake is chilled, making it a little bit easier to ice, and I make sure to put a thick layer on there, and then I start smoothing it out. This takes me a good 15 to 20 minutes. I keep going over the side. You literally just have to keep going over it and over it, filling out some missing spots. After you feel like you did a pretty decent job, put it in the freezer for a good 10-15 minutes. If you don't have room, put it back in the fridge for a good couple of hours. Take it back out of the freezer and start scraping off those edges until you create nice sharp edges. Now you'll notice even with mine, the top still isn't like a straight line. And I didn't notice it until I watched this video, but when I did put the fondant on, I kind of fixed that part up a bit. Next up, how to cover it in fondant. Hello loves, let's cover a square cake in fondant. So if you thought icing it was bad, covering it in fondant is even worse. First up is make sure your cake is chilled, and then make sure you roll out that fondant wide enough. You don't want to end up doing what I'm doing, trying to pull it down. This is the tricky part. You need your two smoothers, and on all the edges of the fondant, you're going to kind of tap them together and squeeze them together. You see that there? Sometimes you might even end up pinching a little bit of the fondant, but don't worry about that because you can cut that off. So you keep kind of smoothing the two smoothers together. They will hit each other and make a clapping noise. That's fine. Sometimes if there's extra fondant, I kind of squeeze it together and then I just snip it off later. This takes about 20 minutes. This is how long it took me to cover this cake. So after I feel like I've achieved a good, nice edge, then I cut off the excess fondant. You don't want to do that too early because when you're using the smoothers and pushing that fondant up, it might go up too much and you'll reveal the bottom of the cake. Always save the cutting until the end. And now on to the airbrushing of this cake. I start with a light brown and then I darken the edges where I want it to look like a box or the top of the box that you can open. After covering the entire thing in brown and even going over those outlines, I use a little bit of black and I very carefully start putting in some shadows. I do not need to cover the top because it's going to be covered with the cake, so I wasn't really worried about that. I love the depth that airbrushing gives. Now, I did make a few molds of gold little scroll work that I wanted to put on the corners of the box or the cigar box. And so I just used a mold for that, painted them gold, and placed them on the corners like you'll see in the next video. Hello loves, you guys like these stacking cake videos, so let's do another one. So I use straws because they're easier to cut. Actually, I use bubble straws because they are wider. So I measure the first straw and then I take it out and cut the rest off according to that height. I put that part in slow-mo so you can see that they fly everywhere. The reason I cut them according to that first one is because my cakes aren't perfectly leveled on top. So this will ensure that when I put the top tier on, it would still look leveled. I can cover up the space in between the cakes with a border of something. Top cake is a 7-inch, so I use 7 straws. I add some buttercream for the glue. I add a skewer for stability. The top tier has a board underneath it. That's what sits on the straws, and the straws help to support it so that it's not mushing down the bottom tier. And now this is the part where I work very carefully and I repeat, careful SpongeBob, careful SpongeBob, careful SpongeBob, careful SpongeBob, careful SpongeBob, careful SpongeBob, bam! And that's it. This is the final product. So there's a border of pearls there in case there is space in between. Just another video to appreciate it. If you want to see how I made the toppers, I do have a Topper Tuesday for that. Everything is handmade and edible. Thanks for watching, loves.